So we're going to talk about how to evaluate or simplify expressions today. So on the top of your notes page, please write the word evaluating / simplifying. Simplify. Now in the word evaluate, there is another word in here, value. When we think about value, that means to solve. So value equals solve. We're finding how much a problem is worth. In order to evaluate, as I try to get this in better focus, there's a couple things that we need to be able to do. The first is to replace the variable when we say variable, that means the letter with the number. What we've been saying in our class is the plug it in, plug it in. So you're going to plug it in. Okay? The second thing you're going to do is you're always going to use parentheses for each variable. And the third thing you will do is you are going to follow GEMMA, which we talked about in our last class. Remember that GEMMA stands for groupings, exponents, multiply or divide, and addition or subtract. Okay? So those are the steps, those are the things you need to keep in mind as we work on evaluating expressions. The next thing I want us to do is to go ahead. I have given you 4 different sticky notes. You're going to place your first sticky note down. And this is going to be so we can study in the future. So you can go back and look at your notes and practice evaluating. So the first thing we're going to do is write A equals 20, B equals -4, and C equals 10. My equation I want us to write is AC plus 5B, or my expression, I'm sorry. It's an expression because it does not have an equal sign. So, in order to solve this, we are going to plug it in, any of our A's, our B's in this place it says B, and our C's where it says C. So, our first step will be to just rewrite the expression with all of the numbers plugged in. So I will write the expression one more time for us to look at on our page. AC plus 5B. So again, A, I see on my sticky note, A is 20. So I am going to have 20. I remember to put it into parentheses times C, which is 10, I'm going to put that into parentheses, plus 5 times my B, which is -4 in parentheses. So now I can begin to solve this. Remember, we are following GEMMA. So our first step will be to do our multiplication. Remember, with GEMMA, we are going from left to right. So the first multiplication step we have is this 20 times 10. If I stick it into my calculator, 20 times 10 is equal to 200. I will then rewrite the entire expression. Now that I have done my multiplication here, I check and say, is there any other multiplication? There is in this case 5 times -4. So I will have my 200 plus, check in your calculator for 5 times -4, and that is equal to negative 20. My last step here is addition. I have 200 plus negative 20, which is equal to 180, which is my final answer. So now I can cover it back up with this sticky note, and when I want to study, I can look at my expression. I can try to do it on my own, and then I can check to make sure I did it correctly. On my second sticky note, I'm going to go ahead and place it down for right now. On my second sticky note, I'm going to write a new expression. My new expression is going to have a is equal to 2, b is equal to negative 4, and my expression will say negative a squared plus 3b squared. The first thing we will do when evaluating expressions is we are going to just write it again so we can take a look at it. So I have a is equal to 2, b is equal to negative 4, and I have negative a squared plus 3b squared. So now that I have my expression written, I am going to plug it in. So for my a's, I'm going to plug in 2. And please remember that you are putting everything in parentheses. Number 2 says always use parentheses for each variable. Your variables are your letters. So I plug it in here, so I just put it in the A. So I have negative 2 in parentheses squared plus 3, put my parentheses, my b is negative 4, close my parentheses, squared. So now it's time to evaluate the expression. Again, we are using Gemma. So the first thing we do is groupings. Now, I have my parentheses, but there's nothing to do in the parentheses. The number is just by itself. So I can move on to the next step of Gemma, which is the E for exponents. With my exponent, I can look and I can see, I see 2 that have exponents. This one and this one. I'm going to go left to right. So I'm going to start with this 2 squared. So I'm going to do 2 squared, which if I do it in my calculator, 1 second. If I do it in my calculator, I can do 2 squared equals 4. So 2 squared equals 4, so I know it's going to be parentheses 4. I still have my negative on the outside, plus 3, parentheses negative 4 squared. My next thing I'm going to do, I still have an exponent, so I'm going to solve for that exponent. I will now do my parentheses negative 4 squared equals 16. So now I have 3 times 16 plus 4 parentheses negative. So now that I have solved anything that's in my groupings, I have done my exponents, I'm moving on now to my multiplication or division. I look here and I see I have a negative times 4. So when I have this negative times a 4, that's the same thing as saying negative 1 times 4. Okay? So I have negative 1 times 4, which is going to be negative 4, plus 3 times 16. Again, I still have one more multiplication piece I can do. So I can do 3 times 16, which is equal to 48. My last step in Gemma, now that I have done all of these 3, is addition or subtraction. Looking at this, I now have negative 4 plus 48. And my answer is 44. That is my final answer. So I can go ahead and cover it up with my sticky note so that next time I can go back and look at it and all the work is right there for me. We are going to move on to doing a fractional expression. Now this time I would like you to try to do as much as you can on your own. I know it's a little bit different because we will be doing a fraction. However, it's still the same plugging it in. So I've got my sticky note here. I'm going to write a is equal to 3 over 4. And my expression that I am trying to evaluate is 5/3 a squared. Take a second on your own and see if you can rewrite the expression. When I plugged it in, I got 5 over 3 times 3 over 4 squared. So again, we are still following the GEMMA rules. My first says to do groupings. Now I have fractions. I could simplify them to decimals. However, that just makes an ugly decimal. So I would rather leave them as a fraction for this case. So the next thing I can do is E for exponents. I do see I have an exponent here. So I need to figure out the exponent of this expression, 3/4 squared. Now, if you recall, if we're squaring something, we are finding that number times itself. So I'm going to expand it down here. 3 over 4 times 3 over 4 times 5 over 3. 3 over 4 times 3 over 4. We'll do that first to get my exponent. So I'm doing 3 times 3 is equal to 9. And I'm going to do 4 times 4, which is equal to 16. So now I have 9/16 times 5 over 3. Same thing again, when you are multiplying fractions, you are multiplying the top and you're multiplying the bottom. So 5 times 9, I get 45. 3 times 16, I get 48. Our last one we are going to do together as a group is one I would like you to answer on your own. We have x equals 2 and y equals -5. My expression is 2 over 3 times -x cubed minus y. I will rewrite it below onto the white page so I can use it for my math. Okay. The first step I'm going to do, we look back at the beginning of our notes, is plug it in. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to plug in my x's and my y's. So I'll rewrite my expression as 2/3 times negative parentheses 2 minus parentheses -5. Remember, in our notes we wrote up here, always use parentheses for each variable. So I have my parentheses around each of my variables. Now I'm going to follow GEMMA's to see if I can solve it. What would be my first step? Oh, and don't forget, don't forget your cubed. So make sure that's there. So for my first step, I am looking at my groupings. So I'm looking at my groupings. I see I have all of this grouped together. However, each one is separate inside. So I'm going to go to my next step in GEMMA's, which is the E for exponents. So I'm going to do my 2 to the cubed. 2, if you check in your calculator, 2 to the cubed, or 2 times 2 times 2. Sorry, 1 second. We can do 2 times 2 times 2, which is 2 cubed, equals 8. So I know that this 2 cubed is equal to 8. I can leave him in parentheses. I have my minus -5. I still have this huge parentheses thing to look at, but all of my exponents are now done. I have a large grouping with smaller groupings that are by themselves, so now I can work towards solving the inside of the parentheses. So I've done my G and my E. I am now at the letter M for multiply or divide. I'm still working inside of the groupings first, and I see I have a negative times an 8. So recall that if it doesn't have a 1 and it just shows the negative, that is technically doing negative 1 times 8. So I'm going to do that first because that's the only multiplication piece I have in this. So I'm going to do negative 1 times 8, which is negative 8. And now I have minus negative 5. Remember when we have minus a negative? That makes it a plus. So I have negative 8 plus 5. Negative 8 plus 5, we can check in our calculators. We can do negative 8 plus 5 is equal to negative 3. So I know this is negative 3. And now I've done everything inside of this parentheses. So now I can do 2 divided by 3 times negative 3. If we recall how to do with our fractions, the easiest way to do this is to make it also a fraction. So to make a fraction, we can do anything divided by 1 stays the same. So I'm going to make this negative 3 over 1. So now I'm doing 2 times negative 3 is equal to negative 6. I'm doing 3 times 1 is 3. And I can simplify this further, negative 6 divided by 3 into negative 2. And that is how we are going to evaluate. So you have these here to help you out. If you're not sure, if you want to go back and practice to make sure you get the right answer. Remember though, we are always first plugging it in. You guys know the song, you know what to do with the plugging it in. You're going to use parentheses for each variable, and you're going to follow Gemma.